There is a fault line off the coast of the Pacific Northwest that most Americans have never heard of. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and it runs 700 miles from Northern California to Vancouver Island. It's not like the San Andreas Fault, which slips and slides gradually. This is a subduction zone where one tectonic plate is being forced underneath another, building up unimaginable pressure. The last time it ruptured was January 26, 1700. It produced a magnitude 9 earthquake so powerful that it sent a tsunami across the Pacific Ocean that hit Japan. And it's overdue to happen again. Scientists say there is a 37% chance of a magnitude 8 or higher earthquake in the next 50 years. When it hits, Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver will be destroyed. Millions will die. And America will face its worst natural disaster in history. So what happens when the Cascadia Subduction Zone finally unleashes 300 years of stored energy? Let's talk about what a subduction zone actually is. The Juan de Fuca plate, a piece of the Pacific Ocean floor, is being pushed underneath the North American plate at about 2 inches per year. That doesn't sound like much, but over 300 years, that's 50 feet of plate being forced down. The two plates are locked together by friction, but that lock won't hold forever. When it finally breaks, the North American plate will snap back violently, rising as much as 30 feet in some places. That sudden movement will trigger the Megaquake. And unlike the San Andreas, which is a strike-slip fault that moves horizontally, this is a thrust fault that moves vertically. That vertical movement displaces massive amounts of ocean water. That's what creates the tsunami. It's a Tuesday morning. People in Seattle are commuting to work. The Space Needle is filled with tourists. Kids are in school in Portland. Fishermen are out on the coast. Everything is normal. Then, without warning, the shaking starts. But this isn't like the small earthquakes people in the Pacific Northwest are used to. This is violent, sustained, and it doesn't stop. Magnitude 9 earthquakes shake for 4 to 6 minutes. Think about that. 6 minutes of the ground heaving and rolling beneath your feet. What do you think happens to buildings when the earth moves for 6 straight minutes? Seattle's skyline, filled with modern skyscrapers, starts to come apart. The city has some earthquake-resistant buildings, but they were designed for magnitude 7 or maybe 8. Not 9. The Columbia Center, the tallest building in Seattle, sways so violently that the steel frame begins to buckle. Windows explode outward across the entire building. People inside are thrown around like ragdolls. Some are crushed when ceilings collapse. Others fall from broken windows. What do you think goes through someone's mind when they feel a 76-story building tilting beneath them? The ground itself liquefies in many areas. Seattle is built partially on reclaimed land and soft sediment. When the shaking hits, that soil behaves like a liquid. Buildings don't just collapse from the shaking. They sink. Entire neighborhoods in Pioneer Square and SoDo tilt and slide as the ground beneath them turns to quicksand. Houses that were on solid foundations minutes ago are now half buried, walls cracking, roofs caving in. What do you think it is like to be inside a house that's sinking into the earth while the ground shakes violently? The roads and highways are catastrophic failures. The Alaskan Way Viaduct, a double-decker highway that runs along Seattle's waterfront, collapses entirely. Cars plunge 50 feet to the ground below. The I-5 corridor, the main north-south highway on the west coast, buckles and breaks in dozens of places. Overpasses collapse. Bridges spanning rivers and inlets fall into the water. The 520 floating bridge across Lake Washington breaks apart, sending cars into the lake. Drivers have no chance. What do you think someone in the passenger seat experiences when they feel the bridge disappearing beneath them and suddenly they re-falling toward water? Portland faces similar devastation. The city sits on the Willamette River and many of its bridges are old. When the Megaquake hits, every single bridge in Portland fails. The Steel Bridge, the Burnside Bridge, the Morrison Bridge, all of them collapse into the river. The city is split in half with no way to cross. Emergency services can't respond. Families are separated. And the death toll climbs rapidly as buildings across the city crumble. Unreinforced masonry buildings, common in Portland's older neighborhoods, collapse within seconds. Brick walls fall outward, crushing people on sidewalks. What do you think happens to the small businesses, the coffee shops and restaurants housed in these old buildings when the walls come down? But the earthquake is just the beginning. The real killer is what comes next. When the North American plate snaps back and rises, it displaces billions of tons of ocean water. A tsunami is born, and it's moving toward the coast at the speed of a jetliner. Coastal towns like Cannon Beach, Seaside, and Newport have maybe 15 minutes of warning. Some places have even less. What do you think people do when they hear the tsunami sirens and realize they have 15 minutes to get to high ground? Most don't make it. The roads out of coastal towns are immediately gridlocked. Everyone is trying to evacuate at once. Cars barely move. People abandon their vehicles and run on foot. But where do you run when you're in a flat coastal town with no hills nearby? Panic spreads. Parents grab their children. The elderly can't move fast enough, and then on the horizon they see it. A wall of water 40 feet high racing toward them at 500 miles per hour. What do you think goes through someone's mind when they see that wave and know they can't outrun it? The tsunami hits the coast with unimaginable force. Entire towns are obliterated in seconds. Buildings are ripped from their foundations and carried inland. Cars, boats, trees, debris, all of it becomes a churning mass of destruction. The wave doesn't stop at the beach. It pushes miles inland, destroying everything in its path. People who thought they were safe are swept away. The water is freezing, filled with debris, and impossible to swim in. Thousands drown within minutes. What do you think it's like to be caught in that water, unable to breathe, unable to see, being slammed into debris over and over? Back in Seattle and Portland, survivors of the earthquake are dealing with fires. Gas lines have ruptured across both cities. Sparks from downed power lines ignite the gas. Buildings explode. Fires spread rapidly, and there's no water pressure to fight them because the water mains are destroyed. Firefighters watch helplessly as entire neighborhoods burn. Hospitals already damaged by the earthquake are now threatened by fire. Patients who survive the quake are evacuated, but where do they go? What do you think happens to someone on a ventilator when the hospital has to be evacuated in the middle of a city with fire? The death toll in the first hour exceeds 50,000. Collapsed buildings, tsunami, fires. But the real tragedy is just beginning. Seattle and Portland are cut off from the rest of the country. Every highway is destroyed. Every bridge is down. The airports have runways cracked and buckled. No planes can land. The ports are devastated by the tsunami, so no ships can dock. There's no way in and no way out. Millions of survivors are trapped in destroyed cities with no food, no water, no power, no way to call for help. What do you think happens to a population when they realize help isn't coming? Within 24 hours, people are desperate. Grocery stores, those still standing, are looted. People take whatever they can carry. Water becomes the most valuable resource. Survivors line up at rivers and streams, filling bottles with untreated water because there's no alternative. But drinking untreated water leads to disease. Within days, outbreaks of dysentery and cholera spread through survivor camps. What do you think it's like to survive a magnitude 9 earthquake and a tsunami only to die from drinking contaminated water? Hospitals are overwhelmed and barely functioning. Most hospital buildings are damaged. Equipment is destroyed. Supplies are running out. And there's no way to get more because the supply chains are completely broken. Doctors perform surgeries without anesthesia because they've run out. They amputate limbs with basic tools because they have no choice. People die from infections that would be trivial to treat under normal circumstances. What do you think it does to a surgeon's psyche to operate on someone without proper tools, knowing they're probably going to die anyway? The federal government mobilizes, but the response is painfully slow. FEMA sends teams, but they can't get into the region easily because all the roads are destroyed. They airlift supplies by helicopter, but it's not nearly enough for millions of people. The military sets up temporary bridges and tries to clear highways, but it takes weeks. Meanwhile, people are dying. What do you think happens to public trust in government when people watch their neighbors die because help arrives too late? Let's talk about the economic impact. The Pacific Northwest is a major economic hub. Seattle is home to Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, and countless other companies. Portland has Nike and a thriving tech industry. When these cities are destroyed, the economic shockwaves ripple across the entire world. The port of Seattle, one of the busiest ports in America, is gone. Trade with Asia is disrupted. Supply chains collapse. Products can't be shipped. Manufacturing stops. What do you think happens to the global economy when a major American region suddenly ceases to function? The stock market crashes. Companies with headquarters or major operations in the Pacific Northwest see their stock prices plummet. Some go bankrupt. Unemployment skyrockets, not just in the Northwest, but across the country as the economic damage spreads. The disaster triggers a recession that lasts for years. What do you think happens to people's retirement savings when the market loses 30% of its value overnight? Months pass. The death toll has reached 200,000. Most died in the first few days, but thousands continue to die from disease, starvation, and lack of medical care. The survivors are living in tent cities and temporary shelters. There's talk of rebuilding, but the scale is overwhelming. How do you rebuild 2 major cities and dozens of towns from scratch? Where does the money come from? Where do the workers come from? And who wants to rebuild in a place that could be destroyed again by another megaquake in their lifetime? The population of the Pacific Northwest drops by half. Some died. Most fled to other states, unwilling to live in a disaster zone. Seattle and Portland, once vibrant cities filled with culture and innovation, are now ghost towns with scattered pockets of survivors. What do you think it does to a region's identity when half its population disappears? Here's the most terrifying part. This isn't hypothetical. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is real, and it will rupture again. Geologists have found evidence of massive earthquakes in the region dating back thousands of years. They happen roughly every 300 to 600 years. The last one was in 1700. We're overdue. Japanese scientists have records of the 1700 tsunami hitting their coast. Native American oral histories describe the earth shaking so violently that entire villages were swallowed. This has happened before. It will happen again. Scientists monitor the Cascadia Subduction Zone constantly. But here's the problem. They can't predict when it will rupture. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 100 years. There's no way to know. All they can say is that it's coming. And when it does, the Pacific Northwest will be devastated. The only question is whether people will be ready. And right now, most people aren't. Buildings aren't reinforced. Emergency plans are inadequate. Most residents don't even know the Cascadia Subduction Zone exists. What do you think happens when millions of unprepared people face a magnitude 9 earthquake and tsunami? So what would you do? If you lived in Seattle or Portland and the ground started shaking, would you know where to go? Do you have an emergency kit? Do you have a plan for your family? Or would you be caught completely off guard, trapped in a collapsing city with no way out? And if you don't live in the Pacific Northwest, do you think you're safe? Because when a disaster of this magnitude hits, it affects the entire country. Supply chains break. The economy crashes, refugees flood into other states. No one is truly safe from the consequences. If this scenario made you realize how unprepared America is for the Cascadia megaquake, leave a comment below telling me if you live in the Pacific Northwest and whether you have an earthquake plan. And if you want more explorations of the geological catastrophes threatening America, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is America Doom, where we examine the disasters that could reshape the United States. Drop a like if this made you rethink living near the coast, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay prepared, because the Cascadia Subduction Zone is not a matter of if, but when.